Many people may not have heard of the metal antimony, but it plays a very critical role in military equipment and military electronic products, and is even used in the manufacture of missiles and nuclear weapons. On August 15th this year, China announced that it would impose export restrictions on rare metals, superhard materials, and related technologies, including antimony, starting from September 15th. Their reason is that this is just a decision made in accordance with international practice and in combination with the actual needs of the country in order to better safeguard national security. But it is worth noting that when Beijing announced the news, some military experts in the United States strongly opposed it because 63% of the antimony imported by the United States depends on China. So why did China suddenly restrict the export of antimony? What impact will this decision have on the United States? If you like our video content, please click to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you can receive all our latest video content. Now let's get into today's topic. Antimony is a very rare and unique element. It has a special property that it will show the phenomenon of heat shrinkage and cold expansion at certain temperatures, which is exactly the opposite of most materials. Moreover, antimony does not oxidize at room temperature, which makes it very difficult to replace. If we add antimony to metal, we can significantly improve the hardness, resistance, and heat resistance of the metal, so the manufacture of many weapons cannot do without this material. However, antimony is not only useful in military equipment, it also plays an important role in many fields such as semiconductors, lead-acid batteries, photovoltaics, and bearing gears, so it is also called industrial MSG by some scientists. But according to current data, the total reserves of antimony ore in the world are about 2.17 million tons, and the annual mining volume is about 83,000 tons. According to this mining speed, the world's proven antimony resource reserves are expected to only last for about 24 years. In the distribution of global antimony resources, China accounts for about 30% of the share, with reserves of nearly 640,000 tons, making China the country with the largest antimony resource reserves in the world. Most of the other antimony resources are distributed in Russia, Tajikistan, and Turkey, which account for about 16%, 25%, and 7% of the global reserves respectively. However, antimony mining faces the dual challenges of high pollution and resource depletion, and other countries have encountered many difficulties in the development of antimony mining. In contrast, China maintains a leading edge in antimony mining and extraction technology. This is mainly due to China's ability to effectively reduce environmental pollution and resource waste when mining antimony metal. Therefore, in the past decade, China has always occupied an irreplaceable position in the global antimony industry. Of course, China now controls about 80% of the world's antimony metal processing capacity. So even if other countries have antimony or resources, they usually choose to transport the ore to China for processing because China has a complete industrial chain and the world's most advanced processing technology. In addition to its advantages in reserves and processing capabilities, China also accounts for about 48% of the global antimony ore production, and smelting production accounts for as much as 71% of the global total. With such advantages, most countries need to rely more or less on importing antimony resources from China when developing military weapons. According to data from 2023, China's exports of antimony oxides reached 35,800 tons. Antimony products were exported at 5,300 tons. Waste was exported at 6,000 tons, and antimony ore and concentrate were exported at 3,800 tons. However, it is worth noting that although China accounts for such a large share of global antimony exports, its antimony resource reserves have been significantly reduced due to years of overmining and large-scale exports. We found from data released by China that as early as 2022, China's antimony mining volume had dropped to 60,000 tons, and by 2023, this figure had further decreased to only 40,000 tons. If this downward trend continues, the global supply of antimony may face greater uncertainty in the future. Therefore, under the pressure of increasingly scarce antimony resources, the Ministry of Commerce of China issued an important statement on August 15th this year, which has attracted much attention. The statement clearly stated that from September 15th, 2024, China will implement strict control on the export of raw materials, processed products, and related technologies, including rare metal antimony and superhard materials. It is worth noting that the statement also emphasized that this export control measure is not aimed at any specific country or region, but is a decision made based on international practice and China's own needs. Its main purpose is to better safeguard national security, prevent the outflow of key technologies and resources, and fulfill China's important obligations such as non-proliferation in the international community. But did you know that China's decision has caused a strong response internationally, especially from the United States? They are worried that after China implements export restrictions on antimony resources, the future military industry of the United States may be threatened. So, what is going on? According to the current development trend, the United States' annual demand for metallic antimony is about 30,000 tons. In February 2023 alone, the United States imported 2,780 tons of antimony oxide. It is worth noting that the sources of these imports are quite scattered. 400 tons come from Bolivia, 280 tons from Kyrgyzstan, 80 tons from India, and 50 tons from Oman. In addition, there are some smaller quantities from countries such as Australia, the United Kingdom, and Japan. However, the most striking point is that a large part of the antimony oxide imported by the United States comes from China, accounting for 63% of the total imports. So I think the US government is also very clear that once a major conflict that is difficult to mediate breaks out between China and the United States, China is likely to completely restrict the export of key minerals such as antimony, which will pose a great threat to the US military industry. Of course, the U.S.'s concerns about these issues are not unfounded. According to a 2020 report by the United States Geological Survey, the United States has only about 60,000 tons of antimony or reserves. Frankly speaking, this number is not large, and most of the deposits have not yet been mined. In other words, although the United States does have antimony or resources, it is almost impossible to mine them on a large scale in the short term due to the high mining costs and the lack of advanced technology. What's worse, even if the United States can successfully start mining antimony, it will have to face another problem building smelting and processing facilities. This is not an easy task, and it will take several years to complete. So in 2020, the United States signed the Federal Strategy for Ensuring the Security and Reliability of Critical Minerals, which clearly listed antimony as one of the 35 national strategic security resources. However, some U.S. lawmakers are worried that if they can no longer rely on imports in the future, domestic antimony reserves may be exhausted before 2025. In order to address this potential risk, the United States began to increase its investment in antimony recycling in 2021, hoping to reduce its dependence on external supply by increasing the recycling rate. But the reality is not as expected. According to existing data, although the United States' production of antimony recycling can only meet about 15% of the total demand. This proportion is obviously far from enough to cope with possible long-term supply chain disruptions. Once the import channel is blocked, domestic recycling production alone cannot meet the industrial needs of the United States at all. What is more worrying is that the reserves of antimony, or in many of the United States' allies, are also quite limited and cannot provide sufficient support. This means that even if the United States intends to get rid of this dependence, it is difficult to find a seller to replace China. As China restricts the export of antimony, it is equivalent to destroying the United States' cash cow. For a long time, major U.S. military companies have made a lot of wealth worldwide by manufacturing and exporting weapons. Everyone knows this. Data from 2023 showed that U.S. military equipment sales to foreign governments increased by 16%. Especially in the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, the United States provided a large amount of weapons support to Ukraine, which directly pushed the sales of military equipment to a record high of $238 billion that year. Moreover, in addition to the Russian-Ukrainian conflict, the United States has also provided weapons support to the new round of conflicts in Palestine and Israel, as well as participated in arms sales and small-scale wars in other regions. So to some extent, war has almost become a cash cow for the U.S. military-industrial complex, bringing it huge economic returns. But now that China has restricted the export of antimony, it will directly affect the U.S.'s weapons production capacity, thereby reducing the number of weapons it exports. For the United States, maintaining global military hegemony has always been the core of its strategy, and arms exports are one of the important means to achieve this goal. If there is a problem with the supply of antimony, the U.S. military production capacity will inevitably decline, which will undoubtedly weaken its global military dominance. Worse still, the reduction in arms exports will also cause the United States to lose some important economic benefits, thereby affecting the profitability of its military-industrial complex. It is worth noting that after China announced an export ban on metallic antimony, some authoritative analyses pointed out that restricting the export of antimony can not only protect China's strategic resources, but also may curb the proliferation of lethal weapons to a certain extent, thereby helping to maintain global peace and stability. So from this perspective, China's decision to ban the export of antimony is undoubtedly a strategic move. So, do you think it is a correct decision for China to ban the export of metallic antimony at this time? To not miss out on our future projects and news updates, please make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on notifications. We will continue to provide you with more exciting and interesting content.